and we set the rules of the pricing incorrectly, and we set them up over a really busy. I think it was around peak time of trading, so like around Christmas time, and we were selling these cards at a 20% loss. We didn't put the VAT rate, the VAT rate, the tax rate correctly in over the weekend, and we'd lost about £180,000, I think, that we owed to the VAT man, to the HMRC, the tax office in the UK. And I think I just remember the sinking feeling of just like, how do we get out of here?
Hi, I'm Rory Holland, CEO of Customer and the host of Mighty Finsights. Every year, I talk with hundreds of financial leaders and innovators. We unpack the highs and lows of working in financial services and fintech. Today, Alex Preece, founder and CEO of Tillo, joins the show. Our conversation led to some really great moments, including how losing 180,000 pounds in a weekend taught him what control really means, why the military helped him develop a sense of achievement and purpose, and the rule he lives by to ensure his business is built to last. Join me as we get to know the people behind the brands we trust. Let's dive in. Alex Preece, co-founder, CEO, Tillo. So excited to talk with you.
No,
We've been wanting to do this for a bit. So glad you're in Texas, in Austin specifically, so we could do this in person. Okay, so before we jump in, I did bring you something. I know you've got something to drink, but you got to have
a superstar. We love a Yeti.
You can't live in Texas and not have a Yeti, particularly in Austin.
That is very kind. I appreciate that, Rory.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it, especially in the moment where it's 100 degrees and we can keep the drinks cold.
Yeah, for sure, even with air conditioning.
Exactly.
All right, so I want to get a lot into Tillo and all the cool stuff you guys are doing. But before we do that, we were just talking off camera. Talking about exercise. So like you like to recharge. We both like to work out. Great way to like reduce stress, obviously stay fit. But you said something else I thought was really interesting. You love horror movies.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Since a kid. Actually
really?
Shouldn't have been. I mean, my son's taken after me a little bit, although you forget like how real they look now. Like they are properly scary now. Even a 15 rating or what, that they are quite. They can get really in your brain, especially at 12 years old. I mean, I started watching them when I was sort of 9, 10, being allowed, finding the VHSs and just putting them on and then just being addicted to Halloween and freaking Freddy Krueger and Hellraiser and all of those things. I do like, my wife hates them. But my son and my sister absolutely loves them. I think my sister and I are probably the only ones in the family that really do. My mum as well, to be fair. But yeah, I do like them. You?
Somewhat. They've. I like the old ones. So that's what I was going to ask you. Like, were there particular horror movies? One that, like, when the credits rolled, you were just like, "Wow, this is the best movie I've ever seen."
I just have this. I don't know. I find it really therapeutic. Weirdly. That sounds weird even saying it. I enjoy like turning lights out, getting into bed or on the sofa and just putting something on that, I don't know, just takes you to a place that you can't, you disconnect, you're not thinking about anything. Whereas I find, I don't know about you, but there's some programs, obviously there's some amazing classics like The Sopranos and like The Wire and, other series that you can sort of dig into. But I find quite often I've got my phone near me and those things I can drift off and start playing my phone. Yeah. Whereas horrors, you don't do that. You're watching it because it's the music's you hooked. I get hooked on what the plot's going to be, the twists, the turns. I watched Echo Valley, which is a bit of a thriller, to be fair, at the weekend. My wife absolutely hated it because it is a psychological thriller, but it's just twisted. It's like and then it all unravels at the end. I love it.
What, I'm kind of curious. In some ways, I think when you watch a horror movie, it brings out something in us, like the survival thing, right? And curious, like, is there any correlation between when you think about that and you think about like running a company, being a founder of a company, like, because in some ways, I wouldn't say that you're in a horror movie when you're founding a company necessarily, but in some ways.
I think sometimes, quite often, maybe there's a correlation between like not being in control, and that is part of the reality with a company in some respects. You're not always in control. That's the reality. The market can change. In the early days, like any small business, there's always things that come along, these curveballs I always talk about that you can't, I remember, I'll give you a flavor of, back when we started the business, there was, put our own money in, me and my business partner, Gareth, we funded it ourselves. And we were relying on engineers to set a lot of the concepts and the rules around the billing and sending and issuing gift cards for B2B rewards and incentives in all these huge programs. And one of these sort of buyers or partners of our platform was a bit of a bad actor. And we set the rules of the pricing incorrectly. And we set them up over a really busy, I think it was around peak time of trading, so like around Christmas time. And we were selling these cards at a 20% loss. We didn't put the VAT rate, the VAT rate, the tax rate correctly in over the weekend. And we'd lost about £180,000, I think, that we owed to the VAT man, to the HMRC, the tax office in the UK. And I just remember the sinking feeling of just like, how do we get out of here? I mean, I can't. We put all our money in. We don't have any more money. And then I'm negotiating with the VAT man saying that, like, if you don't, well, we managed to get out of it, and we had a payment plan we put together, but they were just, we don't do payment plans. We don't do these things. And I think not having that control is the reality. But I think there's this sort of playing with that idea when watching a really good horror movie, that you don't have control of the outcome. You don't know if it's going to have a nice ending. For all you know, everyone could get slaughtered. No, right. And I think that's the appeal of it in some respects. There's a bit of an addictive nature of it. Yeah, and that experience as a founder, oh boy. Well, that experience as a founder, having that happen over the course of a weekend, be like, oh my, when you're early days like that, that's terrifying. Everyone's got them. That's a bit of a horror movie. Absolutely. Everyone's got these stories of just how they got started, how they got talking to someone, and then they thought, wow, you got a bit of a knack here, or there's a bit of a niche here, or there's something going on here. And then before you know it, the idea has snowballed somewhat. You start thinking, actually, I could maybe make a bit of money here, and there's maybe an opportunity. We might be able to solve a problem. And then, it just sort of grows into something that you can't quite fathom. And, we're just scratching the surface of what we're doing. But I can't even imagine what it's like for some like Mark Zuckerberg or some of the companies that are around today that probably changed the world. The early day stories. Yeah. Well, talking about control, you told us that, I'll quote it directly because I got to read this. Apart from being shot in Iraq, the scariest thing you've done is completing the parachute all arms course at the age of 19. So, okay, two great things there. Talking about control or lack thereof. Take me back. Like when you were 19, and you also said that it was the first thing you ever really properly completed. Like, take me back to that 19. And what does properly mean? Yeah. So, I think, like, I don't mind telling anyone that, like, I'm pretty ashamed of like the way I behaved at school. I look back and I'm not proud of the fact I didn't try. I didn't try because there was a bit of a traumatic stuff going on with my mum and my dad, and our family life was not, it wasn't cookie cutter. It wasn't 2.4 for sort of family sort of cookie cut style. It was quite emotional, and I think that didn't enable me to understand fitness, competing. It didn't really I didn't have a competitive nature really around me. But what I did do is I hugely admired my granddad, who had been in the army for 24 years. And that goes back quite a long way. So my mum's side, British, her dad was in, my granddad, and then going back a long way, like a really long way. In fact, I've got the hoof of my great great-grandfather who was an Irish Guard who rode into battle, and I've got it sort of saved on my office desk, and it's an inkwell now, and it's got the Irish Guard battle cry on there, which I just love, that historic piece of history, of my family history. On my dad's side, he's Iranian. He came to the UK, met my mum at college, and then they got together, and his dad was in the Shah, so they go back in a military sort of sense. So when I left school, I sort of lasered in on, I need to do this. I started to get fit, ready for the army. I ran 1.5 miles. And you'll sort of know, it's like there's some basic tests. They're quite easy tests to do. They're not, you need to, not be grossly overweight, but to do 20 push-ups, to do, I think it was like 4 pull-ups or something. It was, not game-changing things. The 1.5 mile run was 10 minutes 30, and I ran it in like 10:28. I can run 1.5 miles significantly quicker than that now. That's like borderline. And I was a slim lad. Like, I should not be running 10:30. I should be running like a flipping, I don't know, like sub 8 minute mile or something. Sub 1.5 miles. So I should be running around 8 minutes. I was significantly off that. Anyway, joined the military, and I got super competitive. It just brought the best out of me. I just loved it. I wanted to win. I wanted to do well in everything I did, from maths, English. We did like the equivalent of some college sort of education stuff there in the military. It was like a junior leaders school thing that I managed to get into. And then I just had, you remember these people that sort of say something or take you under their wing that help you, give you that sense of purpose. And one of them was my first troop leader. And he was the one that said, listen, have you thought about doing P Company? Have you thought about doing the all arms course to be airborne trained? And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't like heights. I don't want to do it. He's like, I'm not even listening to what you're going to say. I'm going to sign you up to it. And he took me under his wing. He was paratrained. There weren't that many of us in our regiment paratrained. And I picked up running. I was good at running with weight on my back. I was good at running. I got quite strong, and then decided to go for it. And you're just seeing all of the boys together, in hell on earth, trying to get this maroon machine beret to put on your head and to have the right to wear your wings on your shoulders. It was the first thing that I'd actually accomplished in my entire life, really, up until that point, that I just felt this huge sense of achievement for me, making myself proud. Like, then there's a few athletes here locally in Austin that sort of proudly sort of shout, prove yourself right. And I think then I proved myself right, that I could do something for myself if I work really hard and I try really hard mentally to get over the line. And yeah, it was like 6 weeks of hell. And I look back and I think just everyone was in the same boat. I was in there with a few colleagues that didn't pass, and I was in there with a few that did. And I remember coming out of it and just thinking, no one can take this away from me now. Even there, like, it was the first thing. I just remember thinking, no one can take this away from me. I've done it. This is the sort of start of something bigger, maybe, in some respect.
Yeah. So that gave you some confidence.
Yeah,
you can.
100%. Yeah, exactly.
Particularly if you were scared of heights and you went up in an airplane and you actually jumped out.
Yeah, and they do these, they don't just put you in an airplane. Like, beforehand, they have these apparatus that is designed to test when the aircraft is traveling at 180 miles an hour, 300 foot above the earth, that you are capable of actually jumping out the damn thing. Because if you hold up the stick, you're going to miss the DZ, which means everyone else behind you is going to miss the DZ, the drop zone. So they're training you to see if you can actually under fright, fear, buckle. And they design, the courses are designed to sort of do that. You're climbing this, horrendous apparatus. There's, I don't know, hundreds of feet high scaffolding. You're climbing up it. You've got big bolts on the end of these 2 tracks. Your hands above your head, legs are like wobbling. You got to go up to the bolts, one step over, shout your army name, pause. If there's any hesitation, you got to do it again. They only give you twice to do it. All these little things are designed. Then you've got, there's another thing you do in an indoor hangar where you actually have to jump out of a mock airplane with a wire attached to you to simulate you jumping out of a plane, see if you can sort of do it. And then, these are the fittest people, around, and you see them work so hard and they get to that one thing. One of my friends was one of them. He could not do it. He got to the apparatus, saw the guys going up there and was like, I can't do it. I can't physically make myself get up there to do that. But yeah, I don't want to do it again. But yeah, I'm actually in Sydney next week, and my son and I are doing the Sydney Bridge climb. So we've booked in to climb the bridge. And every time I go up something that high, I don't really enjoy it. But
you're not jumping off of the bridge.
I'm not jumping off.
I was going to say, there's not a bungee thing or anything, right?
Okay. Not, no, I don't intend to be doing that.
Oh, gosh.
But yeah, it was a sense of achievement though. And although I look back and I know how much it hurt, I also know how much it meant to me personally, because like I said, it was the first thing that sort of I was able to properly put my name to that I managed to do. But I had to wait 19 years to do it. But,
that's awesome. No, that's such a cool story. And how, coming out of the Army, you started one of the first of UK's daily businesses, right?
Yeah. So a bit of a windy road, really, very rocky. I decided to leave the Army. I decided to set up an online retail store, selling just merchandise and things to do with sort of luxury candles and getaway bags and things. Started the business. Unfortunately, I ended up going bankrupt about a year after setting up. So I took a £25,000 bank loan from the bank, because the banks love folk from the military, because you were guaranteed to get paid every month. So they would lend money accordingly to your earnings, but you could borrow money. It didn't really matter what part of the military you're in. You were able to borrow. So I pretended to the bank that I was going to buy a car. I used that money. I then left the military. I started a business with that money. Real shock to the system. Spent all my money on stock. Couldn't get rid of the stock. I ended up selling the business. My wife and I managed to get rid of it, girlfriend at the time, and I ended up having to go on the Dole, so your equivalent of welfare here.
I think this kind of thing happens more than people realize. Bankruptcy hits entrepreneurs just like it does everyone else, and it really hurts. All the more if you have to go on welfare just to live. Those social welfare systems were put in place for a reason, to help people get back on their feet. And Alex definitely got back on his feet. In a minute, he's going to talk about his 8-figure company exit that came less than 2 years later. But that moment wasn't all champagne and Ferraris. Whether we're in the middle of a failure or success, we still need love and support to help us move forward.
So I went on that for...
They call it the Dole? Going on
I don't actually know what that means. The D-O-L-E, Dole. I don't know what that is, but it's a slang word, I think, for welfare or benefits. I was on that for 6 months, and then I worked for a couple of startups, managed to get a job, cash in hand, doing some bits, and then ended up working at a startup incubator in Brighton and Hove, which is where my wife and I were living at the time. I met my business partner there, best friend, business partner. We saw this amazing business on TechCrunch called Groupon that was doing really well in Chicago. They'd only just started getting going, and we knew a friend of a friend was an investor in that business through TCV, Technology Crossover Ventures. And we just couldn't believe how innovative that business model was, that these consumers were giving you all their money up front on the premise that they get this amazing deal if it can pass through. And we thought we could easily start that. So we ended up, we scraped together some money from ourselves. My wife supported me through that time, my girlfriend at the time. So she was sort of paying for everything while I buried, I don't know, I think I put 10,000. We managed to borrow a little money. This was that the banks, some of it was quite relationship led back then. So they'd hear what you're up to, and they'd sort of back it for 5-10 grand. So we managed to get 5,000 or 10,000 from the bank, Gareth put 5 or 10,000, I put it. So we had a bit of money to sort of do payroll. We had 2 founding members effectively. We gave, I think, 10% of the business away or something to those guys. And we got going. And then how on earth we managed to effectively get a tiny bit of traction, get in a trial with the world's biggest comparison website, bunnysupermarket.com, who's a FTSE 250 business. It's like a Fortune 500 here sort of thing. And they did a trial with us. We started to outsell Groupon in the UK because of their enormous database that they had. And then they acquired the company within 8 months of us starting the damn thing. And it was a ridiculous ride. I couldn't believe it. It was like I think the figure to the city, we didn't get all this money, by the way, but it was £11 million reported to the city. I went for dinner the night before with one of my best friends. His name's Alex, and we went for some chicken, and I had to ask him to pay for that bill because I didn't have literally any money the day before the money kind of hit the bank account. I had nothing. We had gone all in. We needed that to kind of work out. So it was a huge learner in just scaling. Corporate marriage didn't really work. Boom and bust. Employing lots of people, creating something locally in Brighton Hove, corporate contracts with like Herbert Smith, a huge lawyer firm in the UK, and everything in between. It was a great learning curve.
My goodness. So,
yeah.
Oh man. So you were on the brink of, no money. You had no money.
Yeah.
And it was literally like, I can't afford to do anything right now. Your wife or your girlfriend at the time had been supporting you. God bless her.
Yeah. I don't know.
How would, going back to your military experience and the confidence you built and completing what you did and accomplishing what you did, how much of that carried forward into what you were doing now? Like, was that a touchstone for you to say, I'm going to stick to this?
I always think that sometimes it's, I think it's a subconscious feeling a lot of the time that I've been bankrupt before that acquisition. So, and then before bankruptcy, I've been, on the moors of Scotland, freezing cold, raining in a ditch, all muddy, waiting for the morning to hit to kind of not be on stag, looking out into the middle of nothing. And then before that, it was, no money, being in a council sort of estate in the UK. There's always been something worse, if that makes sense. Like there's always been something worse, or there's always someone worse off. And I always just put my mind to the cards I'm able to deal in front of me. And I think when I look back at some of the lessons that I've taken from the military, it is, the ultimate trust that you place in your peers around you. And when I've got colleagues I work with today that, I trust implicitly, and trust is earned, but, ultimately they've been along the journey for a long time, a lot of these people. And that helps you get through a lot of hardship. It's never as bad as what it seems. I always sort of play that card to myself that it's all right. It doesn't really matter. It's, I've been here, I've done that, I've been in Iraq, I've been shot at, I've had horrible cards dealt in other areas, health as well, that make things never as bad as what they seem. Someone's negotiating a new contract, or someone's just decided to leave. It's never really that bad. I think we're very fortunate in this part of the world that we don't have to worry about that, the real fundamentals of life, like in some respect. So those principles unconsciously that I've sort of gathered along the route, probably like yourself, I've been managed to, I use them all the time today. And it's those guiding principles of not always being aware that curveballs are always going to come along. They're always going to try and throw you off track. The guiding principles of it's never as bad as what it seems. There's always something worse off to deal with. I think like a child growing up, like your son sort of doing something quite dangerous in his pro sport that he loved and enjoyed and gave up. I think and I'll refer it back into the question a bit more, in that, like, my children are quite spaced out. I've got a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a nearly 5-year-old, and seeing them all together it's super interesting, comparing them when you're on holidays and the needs that they all want. But then knowing that this little beautiful creature that looks at you is so intently at 5 or 4, they look at you very differently when they're 12, and they look at you differently when you're 20 and 30 and all the rest of it. And I think a company is no different. And it's taken me a really long time to understand that. And it might sound a bit weird, but the first company was gone. The first one was gone because it went back, it kind of went bust. Second one, there was success there, but I didn't really see it through for that long. It was only for a few years. It's only 2 years. This one I've built now for 10 years, and seeing the evolution of something like a child it's quite scary, actually, seeing this thing get much bigger than you can control. Like a child, it's going to go off and do it. So I think there's going to be a lot more governance in it. You can't behave like you did in the early days, like you do these days now. And I think those principles of that I put on myself to just try reinvent myself every year, trying to just constantly perfect, look at it, admit that you are winging it a bit at the time, most of the time, trying to figure out what the right thing to do is. As long as your core principles are always in line and you're able to revisit them to try and perfect them, 360 reviews, all these sorts of things, I think they ultimately help you grow and adapt to the marketplace you're operating in.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely want to get into the 360 review because you shared some interesting stuff there. So transitioning, I want to talk about Tillo. So tell the audience, what does Tillo do? And then coming out of those experiences you just talked about, what inspired you and Gareth to stay together and then start Tillo?
Yeah, so we saw this market that was a huge market and growing. So at the time, I think it was 600 billion or something. It was some stupid number. The weird thing with this market was that almost nearly 60% of it was B2B, meaning that a large proportion of the market was sort of owned by very large businesses that were issuing these rewards and incentives as a way for consumers to get more. Now, I've always been in businesses really that give consumers something back. There's some value, there's a discount a lot, there's a commission a lot, there's making something go further. So we love the nature of the consumer being at one part of it. We'd been used to working with very, very big brands in our previous business, and this was certainly part of that. 30 brands in the UK anyway. It's a bit like the US. 30 brands in the US, I think, make up 2.2 trillion of spend. Same sort of values, not value, same sort of economics work the same in the UK. And we had relationships with a lot of those retailers. And we also knew some of the B2B buyers, but they were all buying these vast quantities of rewards, gift cards, incentives in fixed denominated stock in a fragmented way that typically did not unlock a lot of value for the consumer. And I think, how do we kind of figure out how to get involved in this and add value in the ecosystem? Fundamentally, it was very reward and incentive heavy. And we'd found a couple of opportunities just by being busy in this industry that needed and wanted to put gift cards effectively in their ecosystem to keep it in their retail ecosystem. So this was one of the largest cashback, or is one of the largest cashback channels in the UK and in Germany. And these guys were helping consumers save vast quantities of money on everyday spend and on holidays. And the money that was being collected as cashback, they wanted to, instead of paying out to people's bank accounts, they wanted to make it a no-brainer for the consumer to make those funds that they collected go even further and to keep it in retail. And that's where gift came in. So we were able to enable these brands that wanted to go into this application. And the only way you could make it work was via APIs. This was 10 years ago. They weren't really the thing back then. You couldn't do it with fixed denominated stock. You couldn't do it in the fragmented way that was pretty much standard back then. And we just didn't. We backed ourselves. There were two American incumbents that were in the market at the time that were very much focused on physical retail, and we just sort of pioneered the ability for these sorts of applications: cashback, rewards, incentives, crypto, open banking, financial technology, fintech, enabling these applications to innovate off the top of our platform. And effectively, you can probably say that I've said that a few times, we've created a Stripe for gift or rewards.
Unless you're building the so-called rails or plumbing, it's hard to get excited about that layer of financial services. But like indoor plumbing for clean water, the pipes aren't where the magic happens. It's what you can do with the water that really matters. In the case of gift cards, Tillo has engineered a way for gift cards to quietly become part of a mortgage payment or cash back for people without premium credit cards. Alex is giving underserved, underbanked people the same advantages as everyone else. The best infrastructure disappears. It feels effortless, like turning on the tap.
We've made it super simple for all these amazing innovators, really, to innovate off the top of our infrastructure to create something very meaningful to the consumer.
Yeah, and you said something, I'll make sure I got this right, that gift cards as a cost of living tool?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean by that?
So more often than not, a lot of the applications that we power or behind, they're offering something really meaningful for everyday spend to their either member or employee, in so much that by enabling these consumers to buy a gift card with a level of rebate or commission there, enables their paycheck to go further instead of using their debit card or credit card. Because remember, not everyone is eligible for these premium level credit cards that are on the market. There is a huge population, UK, Europe, Australia, India, all these countries who operate in America, Canada, that don't have access to those cards. And that's where gift sort of really comes into its own. So we're using our infrastructure to enable brands to offer a commission or a rebate or an incentive to the consumer because they want a new customer on incremental spend. The buyer, the partner, so the person, the business that connects the two, is often turning a cost center into a profit center, because if you move money, there's a cost to it. Now, moving gift, there is very little cost at all. So that it turns from a cost center to profit center. And then the consumer is thinking, well, I'm going to go to Walmart anyway. And I'm going to get a reward for doing that. And that's where this we call it the Tillo power triangle, but ultimately each party in the ecosystem is winning. And quite a lot of the use cases that we are unlocking and enabling are the most innovative use cases to help people's money go further. An example, we've got a partner today that is enabling the margin that's being acquired by the consumer. It's on the gift card. So the consumer buys the gift card. The margin that's in there, the 4, 5, 6, 7%, is by being directly attributed to that consumer's mortgage. So it's paying down their mortgage. There are applications that pay towards their pension, their 401ks, instantly. It's amazing. This everyday spend is being unlocked by the power of this branded currency, this gift card, and the mechanics behind it. It's not just, there is no gifting in our world, really. It's all self-use, and it's these innovative self-use use cases that are being born out of the power of this financial instrument that we call a gift card.
God, that is so cool. So Can you give me like maybe a couple of examples. You mentioned employer, but maybe start with the consumer one first. You mentioned Walmart, pick any brand, but maybe describe the triangle and then give us a real world example.
So you've got, these incredible businesses, credit card companies, financial tech companies, they're all struggling to keep these consumers, these employees, let's say use consumers, they're struggling to keep these consumers loyal to their application, their banking app, their cashback app, their reward app, all these different applications. And they're using gift as a mechanic for that consumer that's a part of that application, let's just take a banking app that wants to enable that consumer to pay into their pension via the integrations that they've got to the pension providers. The buyer, the partner there, that application is offering something unique to the consumer, because they're offering a Walmart card, in this example that we're going to do now, let's say 4% off or 4% cashback, or we're using the margin there, the commission, as the tool to enable that consumer to go shopping, to actually redeem their card. And that 4%, that $100 card that they've paid $96 for, that $4 is being directly attributed to something that's very meaningful to that consumer. And it could be a pension, it could be a mortgage, it could be a savings pot, it could be, the more one-dimensional ways of doing it are just giving them cash back, just giving it instantly to the consumer. Other innovative apps that we're seeing are using it to buy stocks and shares instantly with the margin of gift. So that $4 example in that Walmart card is directly being attributed to buying potentially Walmart stock through the integrations that the application's providing to that consumer, has the integrations back into the other applications needed to push that value back into the stock market via those brokers.
Yeah,
which I think is just, it's so cool. I mean, it's like, instead of you using your, I don't plug names, but like Chase card today, and you get 3% back. Great, that goes back into my credit card point wallet. First off, not everyone has access to those cards. Two, it's very transactional. And that's the difference. Like here, we're creating an ecosystem, which in turn is creating this caught up value that's very transactional to be very personal. And I think that's the really exciting thing in this ecosystem, is we're seeing applications using the brands that people love to shop at, and the commissions and rebates that are there to attach something very meaningful to that consumer, either investing, saving for later, paying something meaningful down that you're thinking about all the time, and fundamentally getting access to rewards that they may not be eligible for anyway, because they might be blue collar workers and actually their income threshold is not enabling them to get those cards anyway.
That's awesome. So thinking about what you said about like watching your children at the different ages, and then being a part of your first business, and then your second one lasted a couple of years, so much different than 10 years now plus. The mature, like what you're describing sounds really complex. Like, did it start that way in your head in 16?
No. No. I think it sounds like it's super technical. It is a complicated architecture under the hood to some extent. But if you just think like a brand has a gift card program, how do they, beyond the gifting element of it, how do they distribute and grow that program? We enable that to happen in all these different channels. So we need to plug into those brands, and of which we've got thousands and thousands of them now, like over 4,000 or 5,000 brands, and all the brands that you can think of that have programs. And then we're bringing new ones in, like Gymshark and all the ones that are sort of digitally native and much more newer in the ecosystem. But at the heart of it, it's just APIs and connectivity. And I think at the start, it was just about solving this one cashback this huge cashback application in the UK. It was enabling them to fulfill their one RFP need that they couldn't fulfill. That they went out to market, no one had the connectivity, no one had the brands that they wanted, and we were just trying to solve that one thing. So we just needed, I think it was like 12 retailers. Weirdly, all the retailers we had, it was like the brands you probably wouldn't even have heard of. There was a few big ones. There was Starbucks on there, as a few others, but there were some very small ones, and we just managed to fit the RFP and make it work. It solved a huge problem for these guys, and actually, under the hood, that was quite simple. Taking that and then moving it into different geos, and then doing settlement in different geos, and then enabling money flows to work seamlessly across all these different retailers, all these different aggregators across the world. That is complicated. There's a whole, there's nearly 300 people now, and by the end of the year we will be anyway. And that's a lot of problem solving. But at the heart of it, one geo, certain retailers, few applications. It wasn't that difficult. Finding a price for it was, because there was no pricing for this stuff. We had to make up a SaaS model. We made up all this stuff and saw what stuck. We just started really high and then came down to what was more reasonable.
Yeah. Quite an evolution. You had, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've heard you say publicly. I think I've read you say this, is quoting you, enduring businesses are built through resilience, patience, reinvention, and great people. Those things compound over time in ways that are difficult to appreciate in the early years. So 10 years ago, Tillo was a vision solving a problem. And then now it's compounded in ways that you just described, you didn't see coming. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the enduring business and what you built so far. And
I mean, well, first off, neither of me or my business partner had an idea that we could get to. I think the conversation had in the coffee shop, and we were talking about, it's going to be very difficult to get beyond, 20, 50,000 a month in sales to pay the payroll and all these things. As we were growing a bit, we had a few people, maybe 10, 15 people or something. And then it started to grow. And I think, it's one of the reasons why, my business partner and I sort of came to, he wanted to move on and to do something completely different, move out of industry. But I think knowing what ceilings to put on things, knowing that ceilings effectively limit your vision is something that's resonated to me quite massively over the last 4 or 5 years. I've been on my own for 4 years now as CEO, doing, built a new team around me, went back to platform play. We confused it. We're entrepreneurs. We're trying to do everything at once. And, wherever something's shiny, we were running off doing it. And that did limit the business a lot. And it did needed focus. And I think, if I look back over the years, the enduring of trying to do a Series A, failing, the enduring of trying to raise money at certain times didn't work. We had to go back to doing it ourselves. Me and Gareth PG'd our houses. We went all in. We went in before COVID. We thought COVID happened. Our sales started to come off a cliff. We felt the sales, I think we went 20% under what we were expecting things to happen overnight. And until the government initiatives were sort of announced, we thought we were going to have to let people go, do really drastic, huge measures. But thankfully, all these things along the way led to having more control, building out our destiny the way we wanted it to be. And I think in those early days, I think it probably is quite fair to say that we were looking to solve a problem, get going, and sell it. And that was a huge limiting factor, actually, when I look back now, because we would have checked out, done very well. But that's the classic thing in Europe and Britain. We always sell up. I feel like a lot of the time, not so much now, but back in the day when we were going, that was the common theme. It was people sell up too early. They sort of give up on their destiny. They make enough money for themselves, and that's sort of it. Whereas moving to Texas, is and living the American dream. It's like, why would you sell? Why would you limit your ability to just take it as far as it can go? And that rubs off on you when you're here. And I think that has enabled me over the last 2.5 years living here to sort of think a lot bigger. We can be a be as big and as I say as big. We can fulfill the full opportunity of what we're destined to do. Ultimately, I don't really have a size of employee count or revenue or anything in my head. We have targets, but actually, now we've got quite a sizable team in Cape Town. We've got quite a sizable team here. We've got a team in Australia. And it's like, well, actually, we could do some really cool things all over the world. And there's no end to what we can achieve if we just keep the same philosophy, working to partners, creating value, and that sort of thing.
If you've ever faced the choice of selling your company or continuing to build, you know how hard this is. Starting, growing, and running a business is an unbelievable amount of work, and the buck always stops with you. When someone offers to buy you out, it can feel like the fulfillment of a dream and the chance to recover from all the stress. Alex almost did that with Tillo. Instead, he decided to keep building and change his perspective. I don't think Tillo got more ambitious because the opportunity got bigger. I think the opportunity got bigger because Alex finally let himself believe it could.
Yeah, build it like you're never going to sell it. Like it's.
Unfortunately, I have had to take some liquidity along the way, which to like live life and enjoy life at the time. And I do sort of have a bit of an envy in the back of my mind of what would it have been like if we do this business. We couldn't do that with. There was no way of being able to achieve that. That being said, still massively enjoying the ride.
Yeah, it's a ride.
It is.
Kind of like jumping out of a plane sometimes. Okay, so, God, there's so much good stuff in there. The fact that you guys have endured and gone through so much, you and Gareth, great to hear. I think you're still friends, right? I think you say that, right? Finding a good partner, kind of like marriage, very important. Yeah. Makes all the difference. And it sounds like you've got a good one in him. And well, congrats on the success. That's really, really neat. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit. We like to ask this fun question about fantasy headhunting. So you shared, if you could hire anybody of all the people in human history, you could bring into Tillo. You chose Michelangelo.
Yeah.
Curious. Why that? Why him?
Do you know what? I'm a bit of a blast on part. I was in New York. I was in a museum. This is a really short story, but I was in New York with a colleague of mine, and we were going around this museum, and Michelangelo had they had a traveling Michelangelo, sort of all his some artifacts. Then they had pieces that were given to this traveling museum that was in Noma. Is it Noma in New York?
In New York?
Yeah.
Noma, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't there that long. We just happened to be there. We're in the museum, and there's pieces being given by Queen Elizabeth II. There's pieces being given by private collectors all over the world. And there was drawings of that Michelangelo had done when he was like 12 years old, 13 years old. I couldn't even... These drawings were like world-class sketches that you'd put up and just think that they were real. It was incredible. And I just think having an afternoon dinner, having someone working with someone like that, with that mindset, vision, would just be profound, like properly profound. I mean, it's just the skill that some people have. I do sort of feel sorry for a bit, nowadays. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here of just that old workmanship of like stonemasonry, carpentry, creating, drawing, and maybe not drawing so much, but there's some skills that thatch roofs, for instance. Like there's people that just don't want to take that stuff on anymore. But it's a beautiful craft, and we all admire it when we see it. I think that was the thing, seeing this child effectively drawing what is the most incredible sketches and thoughts and ideas would just be mind-boggling, let alone work with someone like that.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
All right. So going a completely different direction. So we asked you a question. If you could clone yourself and take it on a completely different path, you said I would be a fighter pilot or Apache helicopter pilot. And you already mentioned jumping out of airplanes, paratrooper, the military, being shot at in Iraq. But you're scared of heights. So connect the dots for me on that.
I don't know. I've just always admired, and I know when I've seen pilots and been in planes and not just commercial, but military too. I just think it's the freaking best thing ever. Like just traveling that sort of speed. And I remember seeing and hearing some of the stories in Iraq and, power going down, map reading with a mag-light torch in their mouth with the map on the cockpit, like windscreen shield, being told coordinates on how to drop fast air bombs on stuff. I'm like, what the like, that is so cool to be able to do something so alien to my world. I think that's the thing. It's just so different. Being able to get up in the morning, check your plane over, go for and do amazing stuff. I just think that is something I would love in an alternative life. I'd love to think I could do it. I don't think I could do it, but yeah.
I think, it makes me think of the new Top Gun movie. I remember that came out, I think in 86, the first one, and I wanted to be a pilot. What do you think that says about you? So you love horror movies. You overcame fear of jumping out of plane, becoming a paratrooper, which is, just amazing. And now you're talking about this, like you like to go fast. You like to do things that scare you. What do you think that says about you?
I feel like I'm very organized. I like to have rigid routine, all these sorts of things, nothing sort of out of the ordinary or surprising there. But I think I don't know what you're like when you go to like catch a plane and stuff. Like I like to just get there as the plane sort of, you're ready to get on the plane. Like that's what I like to do. Just getting here. I left at exactly the right time to get here exactly 5 minutes before. I'm very much like that. My wife, on the other hand, is totally different. She likes to get there 2 or 3 hours before. But I feel as if I perform better on the spot. Inside, yes, you can bomb. I've done talks and speeches and things. I've just gone, that's not my best performance there at all. But more often than not, you get the real feeling underneath when you're being pushed. Like I never would have dreamt in my wildest dreams I'd be doing the things I'm doing at the minute, and I feel I'm not just grateful, I'm super appreciative, and I feel very privileged to do the things I'm able to do now because they've not always been the case. And I think that in itself I don't take for granted. But I think, I don't know what I think. I think that I like to not take things too seriously. I think maybe it's how I look at most challenges ahead of me, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I think we can all take ourselves a little too seriously.
Yeah.
You mentioned control early on, and I think we're all like subject to and prone to think that we can control things until we can't. And that just comes with age and maturity and learning that no, there's no such thing as control, really.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nice to be organized and keep your life in some order, right? And to have routines. And I think that's really healthy. But I also love the fact just your hair on fire, flying in a fighter jet. And I mean, same thing. If I could be Tom Cruise someday, maybe my brother flies. So flying in his plane, a Cirrus SR-22 is just, it's so cool. Like,
I think it's because it's alien to where I'm at today. You get in your car and you go to work and you have, meetings and you're leading, you're doing things, but like, flying a plane is quite a serious thing. Like it's, if you mess things, you mess things up in a car, yes, you can get hurt, but it's not the same as flying a plane. Like it's serious. I think that's the alien disconnect from my world. It's so disconnected that it has such an appeal, I think. And it's like the horror movie, like I'm not, you do put yourself in their shoes a little bit. You do think, oh, what would I do in this thing? But actually it is quite a disconnect, but you can relate it to at the same time because everyone has the feeling of being a bit scared or what's going to happen here. And I think that's the feeling I like.
Yeah.
Probably the same with starting companies, taking risks, testing out new things, not being afraid to fail. I think, I'm first one to say that I don't like failing. I don't enjoy doing it. I don't like wanting to fail. I don't set out to do that ever. a huge admiration for anyone that sort of just keeps on going and going and going and going and doing that thing. I think it's amazing, keeps on betting on themselves. And there's plenty of entrepreneurs and people that keep on doing that, sports entrepreneurs, whatever it might be. And huge credit to them, because it's not easy doing it.
No, it takes a lot of courage to found a company, and you've done it now multiple times, and you've endured, which is wonderful to hear. And talking about enduring, I read last year that Tenzing came in, new institutional partner. So tell me a little bit about that, and then what's the next chapter?
Big change, yeah. So prior to Tenzing, who's a private equity firm, very down to earth, very much like aligned to where we want to take the business. We acquired a company pre-Tenzing. So I did this sort of myself with my team, and we learned a lot doing that ourselves. We funded this acquisition off our own balance sheet. I think the earn out of the business, it was like £4 or £5 million off our own balance sheet to acquire this company, and it enabled us to have some great tech and some flagship brands that that we would be managing and looking after, exclusive in our ecosystem. And as I was looking, pre-moving to America, I thought the only way to really prove that we want to go global is by me taking the leap of moving to America and trying to convince my wife and kids to do the same. I couldn't do that, unfortunately. I wasn't able to do it, but Matthew McConaughey and Greenlights book managed to convince my wife to take the green light to do it. But yeah, we moved here, and ultimately, as we were growing, there were my best friend, Kenny, who actually helped me buy my business partner out, Gareth, in the early days. Super grateful for him being able to help over the last 2 years. And then we had the co-founder of Indeed.com, Paul Forster, who's a big name here in Austin, given I think they had their founding technical office here. They've got like Indeed Tower and everything here. And then we had a very small fund, and it was me, and that was it. And I felt like the guys were right to get some liquidity now. It was the right time for them to move on and actually to bring someone that could help us grow a global sort of powerhouse. So it was big change, big governance change in the way that we run and look after the business. But very welcomed. We've got a new sort of energy within the company that's super focused on international expansion, and that's sort of our plan at the minute. So still feeling super pumped 10 years in. Job hasn't changed. It's just on the cap table, it's just me and this firm, as well as management. And we're all incentivized and driven and motivated to be able to keep on fulfilling what we're able to do in this market.
I love what you're doing, man. It's such a cool story. Greenlights, yeah, great book.
It's a great book.
Inspiring. If those of you listening haven't read it or listened to the audio, McConaughey covers the audio. I did both. I couldn't put it down and then listen to it on some road trips. But yeah, very, very inspiring. So for folks who want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
So, I like to, I'm quite proactive on LinkedIn. I do enjoy that platform. There is a lot of crap on there, but I think behind it is some amazing stories and people professionally being able to connect with, look after, comment and follow people's stories as they're growing businesses. And actually working in amazing companies too. So LinkedIn, Alex Preece on LinkedIn, and then Alex Preece on Twitter. I do use it a bit. And then email, I don't mind people reaching out on email. There's my emails online, alex@tillo.io. If people want to sort of feel free to send me some abuse, give me some feedback on this, on this podcast and whatever else. But appreciate the opportunity to be talking to you today, Rory. Thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man, so appreciate
you as well.
it.
I appreciate you, man. Like, open invitation. Anybody that's listening wants to come to Austin, Alex and I'll take you out. We had nice dinner, a couple months ago.
We did.
So good to get to know you and to sit down with you here. So congrats on the success. Thanks for the time today. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Matthew McConaughey's best-selling book, Greenlights, revolves around a simple premise. Sometimes life is telling you to stop, sometimes it's telling you to slow down, and sometimes it's telling you to put the pedal to the metal. McConaughey calls that last one a green light, and they're usually disguised as something uncomfortable or scary. Alex Preece knows the feeling, jumping out of a plane at 19 despite being terrified of heights. watching 180,000 pounds disappear over one bad weekend and staying in the fight anyway, packing up his family and betting that a bigger version of the business existed on the other side of the pond. In retrospect, those were green lights, but at the time they felt like fear with no escape, like a moment in a horror movie trapped in a corner with doom staring you down. Alex kept building and looking for a way through. As he said, maybe that feeling of being a little bit scared is what makes life exciting and worthwhile. I love that Greenlights convinced Alex's wife to move to Austin. That book is a testament to the idea that big achievements in life don't come from an absence of fear or certainty about the outcome. Some people get paralyzed by fear. Others use it as fuel. Maybe the difference between a horror movie and a green light is your willingness to keep saying yes. Thank you for listening to Mighty Finsights. You'll find all of our episodes on our website, CSTMR.com, including more one-on-one interviews with fintech and financial leaders, as well as deep dive episodes on specific topics like branding and marketing. This show is produced and distributed by Customer, a financial marketing agency, all rights reserved. Our production team includes Zach Garver, Kathy Logan, Axel Reyes, Brad Jerger, Romina Gomez, and Belin and Curio.